look into this impact creation projects, that is mainly mainly involves the dams and the reservoirs, which drastically alter the flow regimes as well as the sediment transport and aquatic habitats. And also the large scale irrigation projects will mainly have an effect on reducing the main flow regime of the river, and also the increase in salinity and alter the groundwater interactions. And often they involve in the canal networks, which can naturally disrupt the natural drainage systems. So coming back, these are the impact creating projects, which are the dams and the reservoirs. Mainly alter the flow regime of the river, and also there is huge amount of sediment transfer and aquatic habitats migration as well. And the other project is the large scale irrigation projects, which drastically affect the river flows, increase in salinity, and alter the groundwater interactions. And highway and bridge constructions, which mainly affect the increase in runoff sedimentation and pollution from the road runoff. Port and harbor development, pipelines, mining operations. These are the other impact creating projects on the surface water environments. Apart from those, other refining projects such as oil and gas extraction, large industrial facilities, and wastewater treatment plants also has a huge impact on the surface water. Along with it, large urban developments and large scale agriculture, mainly particularly like about the runoff from the agricultural fields. And all these also create a huge impact on this surface water environment. And other impacts to be mainly considered is the changes in the water quality, that is before and after and during the construction of the project and all. The main changes in the quality has to be monitored, particularly the pollution, the temperature, and the salinity of it, and also to alter the water quantity, the flow regime of it, and the availability of the water underground, and the disruption of the aquatic habitats and the ecosystems, changes in hydrological patterns, and increase in erosion and sedimentation are the main crucial things. And the process of impact assessment, mainly in any impact assessment, whether it is air, it is groundwater, whether it is surface water, you name it, any process is the same. The process of any impact assessment of any biological thing is the firstly we have to identify the impact of a proposed project. All right, then we come to the preparation of the description of the existing condition of a project. If it is affecting the surface water, then existing condition of the surface water resources, the quality, quantity, salinity, the temperature, everything, the physical appearance, everything has to be noted. And then procurement of relevant surface quality, that is by following the regulations and the standards. And mainly here the expert judgment as well, and also the stakeholder involvement will be there. And then further the impact prediction of the surface of the project, and then assessment of the impact significance on this surface water environment, and then identification and incorporation of the mitigation measures. So all these six as impact assessment process will be the same for any kind of uh, relevant for any biological projects, whether it could be air, water, anything, noise, socio-economic or health impacts or whatever it is. So if you look into the quantity and the quality impacts of the water quantity, basically it is like very essential to consider, as they are two, as these two are interconnected, and also it can significantly affect each other. So quantity impacts mainly like changes in the flow regimes, that is affected by the dams and the reservoirs, water diversions projects for mainly for the industries and also for the irrigation purposes, which also reduce the volume of the water in the rivers and streams. And then there will be like increased in runoff of water, basically due to the urban development and deforestation processes, which ultimately leads to the flood risk. And reduced infiltration projects, because of the impervious surfaces can reduce the groundwater recharge, will ultimately lead to the improper infiltration process. And also the water extraction, more and more amount of water extraction could also lead to the water scarcity program. And then again the climate change also contribute to the emissions of the greenhouse gases, and also which has a huge impact on climate change, ultimately leading to the changes in the precipitation precipitation patterns, and water availability. When it comes to the quality impacts, mainly the point and non-point source pollutions makes a major difference. That is, the point source is like from where the water is exactly getting discharged from the industrial facilities or the sewage treatment plants and other sources as such. And non-point will be from a runoff or from the urban areas or from the construction sites, where it will be the collection and carrying the pollution from, such as the pesticides, fertilizers, and other sediments from several other surface waters. It will be getting collected, and that is called as non-point. So there is no particular source for it. It just gets collected from several sediments will be collected. And coming to the thermal pollution, mainly discharge of heated water from mainly from the power plants, industrial facilities can alter the temperature of the water, and the rise of water temperature again leads to harming of the aquatic life. And coming to the sedimentation, mainly because of the construction activities, huge amount of deposition will be there, due to which the erosion and sedimentation occurs, and also which increases the turbidity of the water and harming the aquatic ecosystems. Coming to the deforestation, and again removal of vegetation causes the soil erosion and sedimentation. Nutrient enrichment also, mainly the agricultural runoff, which ultimately leading to the water eutrophication, again killing the aquatic organisms. Wastewater discharge from the industries also causes this nutrient enrichment and claiming changes in the uh, chemical composition also, like particularly this acid mine drainage from the mining operations. Particularly, they can release acidic water, which ultimately leading to the contamination of heavy metals, and also to acid rain also might cause, and saltwater intrusion mainly in the coastal areas. This can be seen. And to fix the criteria to protect the water quality, majorly like total, there are some water quality indexes and some load limits. All right, so for which we have to look into it because of water quality protection. And those are particularly this total maximum daily load, which mainly represents the maximum amount of a pollutant of a water body can receive by also following the quality standards. Then comes to the load allocation, where total maximum daily load is then assigned to the non-point pollution sources. All right, so allocation is mainly determined to the non-point pollution, and waste load allocation is mainly for the point sources of pollution. And best management practices should be done for the structural and non-structural strategies in order to design and minimize the pollution from the various sources. And water quality limited segment, majorly this refers to the portion of water body that does not meet the water quality standards even after applying the technology based pollution controls. So that has to be assessed for by using this best management practices. And quality management, again this tells us about the whole planning, implementation, monitoring process, and maintaining the water quality standards. And by practicing this BMP method, designing and implementation for reducing the effective pollutant loads. So let us know about the existing quality and the quantity of the surface water. Mainly, it can be assessed by identifying the water bodies near to the project area, and quality assessment and the quantity assessment should be done, and then physical characteristic or channel morphology. All these has to be done along with the water use and water demand of the project, how it is getting impacted to the local environment, what are the pollution sources, whether it is air, noise, health impact, socio-economic impact, whatever it is, all kind of pollution sources has to be lifted. And then climate change, how the temperature, sorry, how the project alters the climate change in terms of precipitation and everything, groundwater recharging and all, and then following the regulations or not. All right, so if we go into the impact prediction, mainly the affected ones are the shoreline, where shoreline where erosion is more probable chances are there, where changes in water flow levels, wave action can cause the shoreline erosion, and this ultimately leads to the loss of land habitat and then destabilization of the structures near the water and alteration to the habitats as well. And habitats mainly like different fragment habitats for birds, amphibians, wildlife, which totally depend on the transition zone between the water and land. And coming to the bottom interface, where that is the benthing, that is low level water underground basically, smothering and increasing sedimentation from the construction site, or the most of the sediments get accumulated and then deposited at the bottom of the water, like covering as a blanket and then disrupting the habitat of the benthing, flora and fauna as well, impacting the food web totally. And then changes in the substrate, so dredging and changes of flow pattern or ultimately alters the composition of the bottom, that is, it could be sand, gravel, or the silt, and it also affects the type of organisms that thrive there. And accumulation of the pollution, which always causes the risk to the benthic organisms. And impact prediction continues with that of flow variation. So flow variation causes mainly because of the dam and the diversions because of the sedimentation process, and also there will be increased in runoff due to the urbanization and deforestation process. And the water level also gets changes because of the reservoirs and shoreline habitats, littoral zones, and all. And the quality will be assessed mainly by the pollution sources, how it can degrade the water quality. And then eutrophication, because of the excess nutrients, are ultimately causing the algal blooms, oxygen depletion, and potential toxins to the water, and the temperature changes affecting the aquatic life. And the drainage pattern also will be altered due to the impact of the project. And that is mainly the cultivation of the channels, that is mainly caused by the construction and channelization of the project. And other modification can also change the natural drainage pattern. So the natural drainage pattern will be of gravity metric method. So it is always gravitational from the, that is how the pattern is. But due to the excavation process, due to the construction process, so the natural pattern of the drainage will be deferred. And due to which there will be some disconnection of the floodplain. And that is mainly this floodplain development of floodplains can also disconnect the rivers from their natural floodplains, reducing the flood storage capacity and mainly impacting the water quality. And coming to the water balance, that can be disturbed by the reduced infiltration process and increase in evaporation, and also the change in rain patterns and all. Flooding can ultimately, because of the process like climate change, it could be an urbanization process, and changes in the drainage pattern. And changes in the flood extent is mainly due to the modification of the channel. And and the existing use of water, like mainly the changes in the water quantity quality, also impact the existing water users, such as those relying mainly on the water for mainly the irrigation purposes, irrigation, recreational activities, so on. Then why is interpretation of this impact is mainly important? So interpretation is mainly important for the decision making. So as and when the decision makers, that is the involvement of the stakeholders takes place, they give the approval of the projects based on the impacts of the significant impacts on the by the project on the environment. And also what will be the need of the mitigation methods and all will be decided by the stakeholders. And the prioritization, and it helps to prioritize the impacts, mainly focusing on the attention on most critical issues. So mainly minor ones can be ignored and alternate route can be always be planned, but mainly the critical issues need to be focused. And the transparency should be among the public people and the stakeholders in order to understand the potential consequences of the project. And the main factors to be considered in determining the impact significance is the magnitude, how severe is, what is the duration of the project, how extent it can be impacted, like whether it is a local, regional, or national or international, like that, how extent it is. And then intensity of it, how severe the impact is. And the reversibility can be, the measures and all can be mitigated or not, that and all can be deferred. can be considered as a impact significance. And also the sensitivity of the resource, how vulnerable the source is getting affected, and whether it is affecting the endangered species, the protected areas, like that, and compliance with the standards. Does the project impact or violate any environmental regulations or the standards and all. And the public concerns, is there any public concerns due to the project about the potential impacts, how it will be impacting their local community and all. That and all should be taken into consideration by involving the public into this project. And then cumulative impacts and other combined effects of the project should be considered. And basically this interpretation is mainly due to the involvement of the expert judgment, that is the experience of an environmental specialist, whoever will be there, whether it is air expert, whether it is noise expert, whether it is water expert or environmental expert, whoever it is, the judge with the area, the the respected judgment will be taken by the environmental specialist. All right, then quantitative analysis, mainly by using the models, the different models, data analysis, risk assessment techniques in order to quantify the impacts. And qualitative assessment, mainly by describing and evaluating the impact based on the professional judgment. And also to comparison with the standard, how the project impacts can be along with the regulation and the standards, whether it is getting uh, going along with the standards or not. That can all will be used for the interpretation purposes. And for this EIA of surface water environment with the with the present impacts and its significance on the local community and the other biosphere, atmosphere and all, and what are these mitigation process for this kind of impacts. So that and all will be discussed now. And this mainly by decreasing in the surface water usage and ground wastewater generation through the promotion of more like water conservation activities and wastewater treatment and reuse activities will always lead to the decreasing direct usage of the surface water, through which we can protect the surface water into in order to avoid its exploitation particularly. Yeah. And then we go to the minimization of erosion by during the construction project, and avoid the deforestation things and all in order to minimize the erosion. And mainly other projects involving the use of agricultural chemicals, so that could be used to plan for the better timing, better timing for the chemical applications, and manage the non-point and point source through the application of BMPs. And then develop non-point pollution control program for the coastal waters and usage of these constructed wetlands in order to control the non-point source pollution. And use the discharge credit training, so there will be some credit trading through which that can be like stopped or exploited and all. And so coming to the main purpose of it, sorry, so that is all for the surface water environment, for which environmental impact assessment is necessary. And coming to the next one, which is the for the air environment, so environmental impact assessment for the air. So main purpose of EIA in this air environment is to design, to identify, predict and also to evaluate the potential environmental impacts of a project, including those related to the air quality. All right. The main goal for this is to inform the decision makers, the public or the stakeholders, to ensure that environmental considerations are integrated into the project planning and then executed for its development. And then coming to the air quality assessment, so mainly the air quality, so here we have to understand the source of it, then emission of it, and how the dispersion of it and how it is getting impacted. All right. So coming to the source identification, in this we have to identify all the potential sources of air pollutants from the projects during the construction phase to the operation phase, and how it is estimated, like how is this emitted, so how the pollutants will be released into the atmosphere, So that and all will be quantified, and then how the computer models or the manual calculation projects or models will be used in order to predict how the pollutants will be dispersed into the atmosphere, and the resulting concentrations at various locations and all will be used by this dispersion modeling technique, and then impact evaluation, and comparing the predicted pollutant concentration in relevant to air quality standards, and to also assess the potential health and environmental effects. And coming to the sources, so mainly the what are the sources of air pollution? That is the transportation, industrial activity, residential sources, agriculture, waste disposal, constructional sites, and wildfires, volcanoes, dust storms, vegetations. All these also contribute to the air environmental, like air pollution and all. So what are the main key pollutants which is affecting the quality of the air? So the particulate matter. So these particulate matter are the tiny particles that can be inhaled deep into the lungs, causing the health impact. And then nitrogen oxides. These are the gases which contribute to the acid rain and smoke. And carbon dioxide. This is a gas which is mainly contributing to the acid rain. And carbon monoxide, which is like it is a toxic gas that reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. And ozone is like groundwater ozone is a major component for the smog. And VOCs, that is the volatile organic compounds that is react with other pollutants in order to form smog. So these are all the key pollutants which deteriorate the health quality of the human being. And mainly by considering this EIA study, focusing on the air environmental impacts, there are mainly 6 steps. So as we all know, the process of EIA, that is screening, scoping, identification, impact assessment, and all these. So let us look into detail into each step. So the first process is the screening stage, where in this stage it determines completely about the proposed project, whether it requires a full EIA or not. And the main factors involved in this is the project size, the location exactly where the project is going to build, and how the air pollutants will be generated, and that is how it has to be considered. And the main goal of this screening is to identify the projects with potential for significant air quality impacts. The second one is the scoping, where this step identifies the boundary, the impacts, and the main focus on the EIA. So the quality issues comes like into identification, and is also include the specific pollutants of concern, the geographical area to be studied, and also the relevant time frames. So coming to the baseline data collection, where it involves the gathering of the existing air quality of the proposed project, and this also includes the measurement of ambient air pollutant concentration and meteorological data, and also the information on the existing sources of air pollution. So coming to the impact assessment, how do you predict, how do you evaluate? So these things come into consideration, where exactly the potential air quality impacts of the projects will be predicted, and also will be evaluated by using several air dispersion models in order to estimate the pollution concentration, and also to assess the potential health and environmental effects of those concentrations, and also to determine the significant impacts. And coming to the mitigation and the management, where in this process development of mitigation measures in order to reduce or eliminate the identify air quality impacts will be done. And this may include mainly the implementation pollution control technologies, modifying the project decision design and operation, and also the quality monitoring program. So coming to the reporting and the decision making, where these findings and all will be documented in a EIA report and reviewed by the regulatory authorities, and often made available for the public comment. That is the mainly by keeping the project transparency. The decision making authorities use this EIA report in order to determine whether to approve the project, or if so, what will be the other conditions and all will be predicted. And post monitoring also will be often included in this step. And in order to evaluate these environmental pollutants through various stages of the projects, now we'll be looking into that. And first one is the pre-construction phase, that is mainly the planning phase. So basically here we will be determining the baseline air condition. So existing condition of the air quality will be assessed. So this will be assessed before, on or before the project begins. So mainly it includes the monitoring the ambient air pollutant concentrations, and then to assess, analyze the meteorological data, how was the wind speed, its direction, its temperature, and then identifying the existing sources of the air pollutants in the area. And the baseline also this baseline data mainly provides a reference point for comparing the future air quality, right? And then emission inventory. So basically to predict and also to quantify the pollutant potential air pollutant emissions from all the project related activity will be assessed, mainly viewed by the construction equipment, transportation of the materials, land clearing and excavation process. All these also come into consideration. Coming to the construction phase, so these are all now we have discussed before the pre-construction, but during the construction phase the real-time monitoring starts, and mainly the to track the actual emissions, and also to ensure the compliance with that of air quality standards. So how the pollutants are there and how it is affecting the, whether following or in compliance with that of air quality standards, that and all will be monitored, and also identifying the unexpected pollution events will be able to assess. And also by using this dust control measures. So basically during the construction phase severe kind of silt and dust will be there, and how we evaluate its effectiveness, and the dust suppression techniques mainly by watering or covering stockpiles by the green layer of what we screen, the green screens particularly. So these kind of things will minimize the dust suppressions and dispersion, sorry. And then monitoring particulate matter levels also, assess the success of these measures, and equipment and emission checks will be done regularly for proper maintenance and emission control. And during the operational phase particularly, the ongoing monitoring will be done by continuing the air quality monitoring in order to assess the long term impacts of the projects, which mainly involves the monitoring emissions from the industrial process, and then tracking the vehicle emissions from the increased traffic, and assess the impact of the project on regional air quality. And compliance monitoring, whether in compliance monitoring to make sure the project complies with that of air quality regulations and permit conditions, which mainly involve this regular emission techniques, and also reporting emissions data to the regulatory authorities. And coming to the impact modeling, mainly by updating the air dispersion monitor models with that of real-time data, and also to refine the accuracy of the predicted impacts. And the main key considerations involved in this is the pollutant selection. So which pollutant is of major concern based on the project's activity and the surrounding environment will be discussed. And the monitoring techniques. So basically, is by selecting the appropriate quality monitoring equipment and method is always appropriate, and the data analysis where air quality will be analyzed in order to identify the trends, and to also assess the significance of the impact, and the mitigation effectiveness always will be like evaluated to make adjustments as needed. So, what is this existing air quality, ambient air quality? So, what exactly is this ambient air quality? It mainly refers to the condition of the air in the outdoor environment that we generally breathe. So, what are the various pollutants in this? Let's look into it. The mainly the particulate matter, which are very tiny, and it can be inhaled, and inhaled in such a deeply that the lungs might cause this respiratory problems. And the nitrogen dioxide, which is a gas primarily emitted from the combustion sources such as the vehicles and the power plants, sulfur dioxide, ozone, carbon monoxide, lead. So all these are the pollutants which has to be focused and monitored, which ultimately leading to the cause of smog and leading to the cause of breathlessness, and which accumulates in the body overall, and then causing the health issues in the human regulatory system. So, how is this air quality being assessed? By monitoring stations. So, particularly, there are networks of monitoring stations in order to measure the pollutant concentrations at different locations. So, these stations are very well sophisticated with the latest instruments in order to continuously and periodically sample the air quality. And the air quality index is one such tool where it is used for reporting the air quality, and also it translates the pollutant concentration into simple easy understandable scale, indicating the level of health concern. And also these pollutants can use to create this quality index, and which might vary from country to country. And the data analysis will always use to analyze and identify the trends, and to assess the compliance with air quality standards, and to also evaluate the effectiveness of the pollution control methods. And also the modeling. So air dispersion models are used to stimulate how the pollutants are dispersed into the atmosphere, and helping it to predict the quality in the areas while monitoring the data are limited. So coming to the importance, so mainly we have to assess this ambient air quality um, in order to consider this public health, environmental protection, regulatory compliance, and urban planning, and all these. So coming to the impact assessment with project activities. So mainly this can be done by mass balance approach and the box model approach. All right. So coming to the mass balance approach, where this approach is basically based on the principle of conservation of mass, and it also tracks the pollutants flow into or through or out of the defined system, so into a system or throughout the system. So this flow of patterns air pollutants will be considered. And this mass balance approach can also help to quantify the sources and sinks of pollutants, which provides the basic insight into the overall behavior of the air pollutant dispersion. All right. So, application in the air pollution assessment is mainly for the emission inventory. This mainly helps in creating a comprehensive inventory of the pollutant emissions from various project activities, and source appointment, where the determining the relative contributions of different sources to to the total pollutant load will be assets. And the fate of pollutants, that is to estimate the transformation and the removal of pollutants from the atmosphere. And basically by using this model, so by using this mass balance approach model, the main strength is to provide the quantitative frameworks for assessing the pollutant flow, and also to identifies the major sources and sinks of pollutants. So coming to the box model. Box model is simplifies the atmosphere into a defined volume or a box. So it majorly considers the atmosphere as a box within which the pollutants are assumed to be uniformly mixed. Yeah. And then the simple tool will be there for estimating the average pollutant concentration within a specific area. All right, so the pollutants are generally get mixed into the different atmospheric gases present in the air, so they get dispersed into it. And then how this tool will be effectively estimating in a particular area, that will be discussed. And then application of air pollutant assessment. So, application in the air pollution assessment for this box model approach is the preliminary assessment, where can be used for the quick screening level assessment for the air pollutant impacts, and the localized impacts as well, where the localized emission sources are there, that and all will be assessed, such as mainly the construction sites or the industrial facilities and all. So mainly the strengths are that it is easy to apply, and then provides a rough estimate of the pollutant concentrations in the air. And the main limitations are to neglecting the spatial variations in the pollutant concentration, and it also assumes the uniform mixing. Yeah. So it considers an area like a box, and in that specific area, the pollutant concentrations will be assumed, right? So the assumes it assumes there will be a uniform mixing of the pollutants with that of other, which may not be realistic. Less accurate it could be, and more complex dispersion models will be involved. So coming to the mainly like air quality dispersion models, so dispersion models are mathematical simulations which are mainly used to predict and also to analyze how the pollutants get dispersed in the atmosphere. So these models also assess the impact of the pollutant in terms of emissions from various sources. Either it could be construction, industrial, refinery, vehicles, transport, and all that also. And how these emissions affect the air quality are mainly crucial for the environmental management and regulatory compliance and public health protection. So coming to the types of sources. So what are the different types? Elevated point, that is the stack. So if you know the stack, there will be a huge pipe kind of a thing from the industries or pharmaceutical or any kind of industries, and through that stack, only through that pipe, major amount of air will be emitted outside. So that is mainly called as stack. So that always should be at a elevated point. So uh, majorly like 2 kilometers above from the ground and all that and all. So that will be like easily getting dispersed into air. So that is the main criteria for the elevated stack level. And the main types of pollutants are the gaseous or the particulate, and the main averaging times is the short term. So mostly like it will be short term or for 24 hours, monthly or annual it will be, and this type of pollutant sampling particularly, and atmospheric reaction deposition. So these photochemical smog formation or the acid rain formation mainly, you know, that causes this atmospheric reaction deposition. And the main pollutant dispersion models are the man is done by manual calculation or the computer models. When coming to the manual calculation models, basically it is useful for calculating the short term average concentration of the air pollutions at a particular location. And under this manual calculation, there is something called as Pascal Gifford stability classes. So as we look into this picture, this is called a stack, and this is how the dispersion is there, and there is a pattern for the dispersion. So here, see, if you look into this plume, so basically this is plume and this is stack. All right. So these are the air quality monitoring tool, where the meteorological process, the temperature of it, how it is getting dispersed, and all this will be like identifying. And if we see here, so if we see the plume behavior, so how the plume is getting distributed into the atmosphere and then getting mixed into the atmosphere. So there are different types. This is wavy type, this is straight, this is like this. So there are some types, based on it we will be looking into which class of it is. And then there are different classes range from A, that is very unstable, to F, very stable. All right. um, then atmospheric stability is determined basically by considering the factors like the solar radiation, mm, wind speed, cloud cover, all these things. So these stability classes are then used to determine the dispersion parameters in a simplified dispersion models. And essentially, these provide a way to estimate how much the air is getting mixed, and dictates how quickly a plume pollution will be spreading out, right? So this and all will be estimated by this Pascal Guilford stability classes. And coming to the ground level point source model, that is the Gunchen plume model. And this model is mainly used for estimate the concentration of the pollutant, okay, downward from a single specific source like a smokestack. So this, like, this is a stack, and from here the concentration of the pollutants of the downwind will be taken. So this is mainly like a bell shaped distribution. All right. And the major factors to be calculated are the emission rate of the pollutants, wind speed, direction, and the atmospheric stability and distance from the source. Alright, distance from the source, from where it is getting stability, and mainly it affects by the wind, it affects it by the temperature, stack height, and all these also. So mainly the key factors for the calculation of these um, include the emission rate of the pollutant, wind speed and its direction, atmospheric stability, and the distance from the source. And coming to the area source model. So this is another model which is mainly used to estimate the pollutant concentration from the sources. And from the sources, particularly, it could be like urban areas with many transportation vehicles, large construction sites, agriculture fields, and all. This area source models can often break down into the area, which are smaller grid cells, and then calculate the contribution of each cell to the overall pollutant concentration. And these models are mainly more complex than the point source models because they are necessary for assessing the impacts of diffuse the pollution sources. And it is mainly made up of the point sources, and the calculations come out more involved, and simplifications are made by averaging the emissions across the area is used. And coming to the computer modeling, so the Gunchen model and other model is also completely like based on the calculations, the manual calculations by taking out the data from the tools recorded, that and all will be used by using some mathematical equations and all. They will be getting some rough idea of it. So more than the manual modeling, these computer models are more sophisticated that stimulate the real world systems or abstract the concepts using the mathematical logarithms and the data. Mainly, if you look into this computer modeling, there is a model called screen model, where screen generally refers to the simplified screen model, which is used for the air dispersion modeling. And mainly this screen model is used to estimate the pollutant concentration before and after the implementation of the scrubber. So scrubber is a filter kind of a thing which is used for stacks, where exactly the pollutants on or before it gets dispersed into the atmosphere, these scrubbers are used in order to filtrate the pollutants, and such that the majority of the pollutants will be trapped inside the scrubber, and the refined pollutants can be released into the atmosphere. This model will be mainly used to determine the required efficiency of this APC device in order to meet the air quality standards. All right, and coming to the fugitive dust model, where the particulate matter that becomes airborne from the sources like the construction sites, mining operations, and unpaved roads and all. This model will be mainly used, and mainly this model is designed in order to simulate the dispersion of this type of pollutants, and it mainly includes the FDM Pro, which is a software program designed to model the fugitive dust. And these models take into account factors like wind speed, particulate size, source characteristics, and in order to predict the dust concentration and all. So coming to the slab model, this is another model which is mainly developed by the NOAA, and specifically it is designed to stimulate the air dispersion of the denser than the air releases, and this is mainly crucial for handling the situations involving the spills, release of the hazardous gases which are denser than the air, such as LNG, chlorine, propane kind of things. And the main features of this slab model is the dense gas dispersion, terrain effects, and the source types. All right. Then the main application of this lab is mainly used for the risk assessments for the chemical plants and the storage facilities, and emergency response planning for the hazardous material releases, and evaluating the potential impacts of LNG spills. And it is mainly important for the dense gas release. Mm, which pose unique hazards as they travel long distances along the ground and accumulate in low-lying areas. And also it helps in the it provides a valuable tool for predicting the extent and severity of these hazards. So coming to the assessment of the significance of the impact. So mainly we have to assess the impact of it. So that and all will be considered by looking into the baseline conditions initially. So the foundation of the assessment mainly establishing through understanding the existing environmental, social and economic condition before the project begins. And also it includes the data on the air quality, the water quality, noise levels, ecological resources, socio-economic factors and also the cultural heritage. So these by having this baseline conditions, it mainly provides the reference point for comparing the predicted impact and assess the modeling magnitude of the change of the project proposed. So the main importance of it is to have the accuracy in the baseline data for the realistic for reliable impact assessments, and without it it is impossible to determine the extent how the project will be affecting without its existing conditions. And then mainly by involving the professional judgment as well. So experienced professionals such as environmental scientists, engineers and the social scientists, or which you, who use their knowledge and expertise to evaluate the potential impacts. This also involves the analyzing the baseline data, predict the magnitude and the extent of the impacts, and to assess the significance of those impacts and evaluating the effectiveness of the mitigation measures. So the main role of it is the personal judgment is mainly essential for interpreting the complex data, identifying the potential risk and also making informed decisions. And by ensuring the public meetings and the participation, by involving the stakeholder engagement, um, to express their concerns and provide the input for the proposed projects, and involvement of the public participation in order to share the information of the project and get the feedback of it, and incorporate these public concerns into assessment process. And the main benefits of this is to increase the transparency and accountability, improve understanding to the local concerns, and enhance the public acceptance of the project and all. And the main process by involving the stakeholders and this public participation is mainly by the public meeting should be held at the accessible location and times, and information should be presented and clear in an understandable manner. And also the opportunity should be provided for the stakeholders in order to ask questions and provide the feedback, and all the feedback from the from the public will be recorded and also to be reviewed. And the other one is to assess through evaluation of the significant impact anticipated changes. So integration of the data by combining the baseline data, professional judgment, public input, review, and in order to evaluate the significance of the anticipated changes. This mainly involves the comparison of the impacts with that of baseline conditions. And also it helps to assess the magnitude, extent, and the duration of the impact, and also consider the sensitivity of the environment and population getting affected, and also to evaluate the impact of these changes on the local people. And the significance of the determination is to mainly used to determine whether these anticipated changes are mainly significant based on the established criteria and threshold. This mainly involve the comparison in comparing the predicted impacts with that of regulatory standards, and also to assess the potential of the adverse health effects and to evaluate the potential of the economic damage and all. So coming to the mitigation measures by doing the source control, that is mainly by the emissions reduction technologies, by using the scrubbers, filters, and all these, by utilizing the cleaner fuels without sulfur content, and vapor recovery by implementing this vapor recovery systems to reduce the walk emissions, and process modifications by optimizing the industrial process to reduce the energy consumption and emissions, and using less pollutant raw materials, energy efficiency materials, like promoting energy conversion and efficiency in buildings, transportation, and industrial sectors. And coming to the fugitive dust control by doing the watering. So regular watering on watering construction sites, unpaved rocks and stockpiles in order to suppress the dust. So this dust control mainly in Delhi, I have seen that they use this dust control measures by sprinkling the water into the air such that the particulate matter and the dust particle will get suppressed and settle down at the bottom. So this is how the watering will help the dust to get settled down, and by covering the stockpiles of the soil and other materials in order to prevent the wind erosion, And the vegetation, establishing the vegetation to cover the exposed soil to stabilize the surface, and also to create the wind breaks by using the trees and shrubs. So more amount of trees and shrubs, the more amount of wind breaks will be done in order to help prevent the erosion and runoff. And paving unpaved pathways, roads and parking areas also prevent the dust pollution and all. Dust suppressants by using the chemical dust suppressions, and the transportation measures will be mainly by traffic management, emission control standards, and alternative transportation, and site planning design. So there will be some buffer zones in order between the emission sources and the sensitive receptors, that's it, schools, hospitals, residential areas as such. And the design of the buildings also should be done in a such a way that to maximize the natural ventilation and minimize the energy consumption, and utilize the air filtration technique in buildings located in the polluted area. And the land use planning mainly by separating the industrial areas from the residential areas, and preserving the green spaces in order to absorb the pollutants. And also like monitoring and the management involves the major role, that is air quality monitoring. Yeah. So air quality monitoring, environmental management plans, that is by developing and implementing the environmental management plans in order to ensure the compliance with that of air quality regulation and standards, and by conducting the regular audits and inspections. And public awareness is always necessary in order to take the review from them and get awareness. And following the regulatory and policy measures in terms of emission standards, air quality regulations, intensive and carbon pricing, which helps the mitigations methods. And coming to the noise environment. So as of now, we have learned about air, like how the air is getting impacted and what are the mitigation measures and the control technologies will be used. So now if we look into the EIA of the noise environment, where it is mainly crucial for evaluating and mitigating the potential of the adverse effects of the noise from the proposed projects or the existing activities. So the main aspects of this noise for the environmental impact assessment is to determine the existing noise levels, to predict how a project will affect those levels, and to assess this potential impacts on the human health and environment, and to recommend the mitigation methods in order to minimize the negative impact. So the basically to the process involved for this monitoring of this noise environment is to have the baseline monitoring to make sure the existing noise levels in the project area, and source identification of this noise, so pinpointing the sources of noise from the proposed act project, whether it is because of the construction equipment, machinery, traffic, etc. And by having this noise modeling and the prediction methods by using a software in order to predict the future noise levels and based on the project activities. And which also includes the impact assessment, evaluating the predicted noise levels and against the established standards and guidelines. And the mitigation measures mainly the strategies which are used to reduce the noise impacts, that is by using the noise barriers, quieter equipment, and scheduling changes. All these also can be used as a part of mitigation measures. So coming to the reporting, where all these will be done by documenting the findings of this EIA, and recommend the mitigation measures. So the main factors to be considered is the type of sources, distance from the noise sources to the sensitive receptors, and time of the day and the duration of the noise exposure, existing ambient noise levels, and relevant noise regulations and standards, and meteorological conditions as well. So the importance of these noise environment is to mainly protect the public health and well-being, ensuring the compliance with that of environmental regulations and standards, and also to minimize the conflicts between the projects and the surrounding communities, local community particularly, and also to promote the sustainable development. So, what are these regulatory considerations? So, basically, these noise regulations vary by region to region, and country to country and region. variation will be there. And EIS must adhere to the relevant local or national or international standards. And coming to the noise, so basically what is noise and what is the physics of noise? So sound as a wave, so wave, the sound from it mainly starts from a vibration. All right. So how the waves will be there in order to reach our ear, and that and all will be there. And vibrations are that sound originally starts from vibrations. These vibrations create disturbances in the medium like water, soil, solids, and water, air. There will be something called as longitudinal waves. So the sound travels as longitudinal waves, all right, in a straight manner. And this means the particulates of the medium vibrate parallel to the direction of the wave is traveling. All right. So these waves consist of compressions and refractions. All right. So the frequency is also measured, like the frequency is measured in hertz, and that mainly determines the pitch of the sound. And the higher the frequency means the higher the pitch. Amplitude is always is the height of the waves and determine the loudness and intensity of the sound, and it often measures in decibels. And what are the major effects of the noise on the people? Human health and well-being, it has a negative effect, and broadly categorized into auditory and non-auditory impacts. So if you look into the auditory impacts, mainly it includes the hearing loss, that is by prolonged exposure to loud noise, and which can cause the permanent hearing damage. And this is also known as noise inducing hearing loss. And the third one is to even short-term exposure to very loud noise can cause the temporary hearing loss or tinnitus. So tinnitus, this is a persistent ringing, buzzing, or a hissing sound in the ears. All right. Even when there is no external sound source, it will be like very distressing and interference with our daily activities and the daily life. So non-auditory effects are mainly like the indirect effects, which causes the sleep disturbances, cardiovascular problems, physiological effects, and cognitive impairment and increased stress. So EIA methodology for the noise environment. So what are the EIA methodologies involved? So first we need the baseline monitoring. So baseline for the existing noise levels in the project area before the project is implemented, and this provides mainly the benchmark for the existing future noise impacts to assess. Sorry. And mainly the methods includes the sound level matters which are used to measure the noise levels at various location and times. And long-term monitoring may be necessary in order to capture the variations in noise levels. And data analysis mainly includes the calculating metrics such as LEQ and LDN, and also the maximum noise levels. The noise source identification and characterization, where the main purpose is to identify the potential noise sources associated with the project and to determine the characteristics of these noise sources. And the main methods involved are the reviewing the project plans and specifications, and identifying the construction equipment, operating machinery, traffic, and other noise generating activities, and obtaining the noise emission data from the manufacturers or through measurements. So coming to the noise modeling and predictions. So modeling we have done already. So what is the purpose of modeling and also by prediction? So in order to predict the future noise levels receiving from the resulting from the existing project, and also to assess the potential impacts of the sensitive receptors, that is residential, school, hospitals, all these. And the main methods used in this are noise modeling software, that is SoundPlan, CADNA, are there in order to stimulate the noise propagation, inputting data or noise source characteristics, topography, ground conditions, etc., and generating the noise contour maps in order to visualize the noise levels. Coming to the impact assessment, mainly the purpose is to predict the noise levels against the relevant noise standards and the guidelines, and also to determine the significance of these impacts. And the main methods are used to comparing the predict the noise levels to establish noise limits, and essential the potential of annoyance, sleep disturbance, and hearing damage, and considering the sensitivity of the surrounding environment. And the main report mitigation measures are to develop the strategies in order to reduce or eliminate the adverse noise impacts. Mainly, the methods include by implementing the noise control measures at the source, that is the quarter environment or noise barriers, and modifying the project design or the operational procedures, and to provide the sound insulation for the for the sensitive receptors, and to also implement the time of the day restrictions of noisy activities. All right, and then we come to the EIA reporting and monitoring. And the main purpose of this is to report a document on this EIA and also the recommended mitigation measures. And it also helps in monitoring the effectiveness of the noise control measures during the project implementation and operation. And mainly by preparing a comprehensive report by establishing the noise monitoring program and conduct the post project noise surveys. So, identification of the noise impacts, particularly by identifying the noise sources, that is during the construction phase by the heavy machinery and construction traffic, and operational phase by industrial machinery equipment and traffic ventilation systems, public address systems and loudspeakers, recreational activities, and all. Decommission phase, where similar to construction, but with the focus on dismantling and removing, and identifying sensitive receptors such as sensitive receptors as in residential areas, houses, apartments, schools, educational institutions, etc., hospitals and healthcare facilities, types of places of worship, parks and recreational activities, and any location where people or animals are likely to be disturbed by noise is termed as sensitive receptors. So coming to the characterizing the noise impacts. So characterizing the noise impacts, mainly the auditory and non-auditory. Auditory are the hearing impacts, ringing in the ears, speech interference, annoyance and disturbance, and non-auditory are the sleep disturbance and disruption, cardiovascular effects, health psychological effects, cognitive impairment, impacts on the wildlife such as disruption of communication and the migration patterns. And the temporal considerations are mainly the daytime versus nighttime noise impacts, short-term versus long-term noise experience exposure, and intermittent and continuous noise. And the main methods for the noise impact identification is the site visit and observations, which are mainly done by directly observing the noise sources and sensitive receptors, listening to the noise, existing noise levels, and also to review the project plans and specifications by identifying the potential noise generating activities and to obtain the information on the equipment noise emissions, and the noise modeling and prediction, and to consultation with the experts, that is mainly by seeking the input from the acousticians and other specialists, and the stakeholder engagement, and in order to gather the information from the affected communities about the experience with the noise, and to review of the noise regulation and the standards by determining the applicable noise limits and the guidelines, and mainly the procurement of the noise standards by obtaining the document themselves. That is mainly involves the acquiring the official documents that define the noise standards, and these documents mainly come from the government agencies and the international organizations like WHO, and the government like EPA and CPCB. And in order to obtain these documents, you may need to visit the agency's website, purchase the standards from the authorized distributions, and to have the access of online databases and procurement of equipments that meets the noise standards, particularly for the construction and industrial settings. And coming to the impact prediction, the concept of sound level weighted population, which mainly involves the combining data of noise levels with that of population distribution to that of understanding the number of people who are getting exposed to the noise levels. So this is mainly crucial metric for the health assessments. Yeah. and then environmental planning and policy development. So this mainly has the sound level data and the population level data, and sound level data is mainly typically obtained through the noise monitoring and modeling methods, and this involves mainly measuring and predicting the noise levels across the specific area, often using the decibels or weighing decibels, and that is how it can be done. And the population data, which is within the area of interest, the number distribution of population with people, and it can be mainly obtained from the census data, demographic surveys, and other sources. And by combining the data, so sound level data and the population data, these are combined in order to determine the number of people getting exposed to different noise levels, and this can be mainly done by using the GIS and other spatial analysis tools. And this is the measure of sound level weighted population. And the main assessment of impact significance is done by having the public meetings, that is by gathering the community perception, identifying the sensitive areas, and the personal judgment by by interpreting the data. And the mitigation methods for this noise impacts are mainly aiming to reduce or eliminate the adverse effects of the noise pollution. And this can be broadly categorized into source control, path control, and receiver control. So if you look into the source control measures, mainly selecting the equipment with lower noise emissions, that is by using the silencers or mufflers or noise reduction devices, and regular maintenance in order to prevent the increased noise due to wear and tear procedures and all. And for this source control measure, mainly the process modification, that is the changing in the operational procedures in order to reduce the noise generation, and optimizing the work schedules, that is majorly in the night time, so that the density will be very less. And the vibration isolation, so using this vibration isolators, they reduce the transmission of vibrations from machinery to the structures. And coming to the path control measures, where noise barriers and walls will be used in order to block the transmission of the sounds. Distance and layout, where the increasing the distance between the noise sources and the sensitive receptors, and designing the layouts in order to minimize the noise propagation, and noise plan, proper site planning. Landscaping and vegetation is another one, where planting trees and shrubs also absorb and reflect the sound, and creating the earth berms in order to act as a noise barriers and acoustic enclosures by enclosing this noisy equipment or process within the sound absorbing structures. And receiver control measures by sound insulation, proactive personal proactive equipment like land use planning, community awareness and education, noise regulation and enforcement following these, and relocation also can mitigate the procedures. And coming to the EIA of the biological environment. So these and all, till now we have learned about surface water environment, and then air pollution environment, and then noise pollution. Now if we look into this biological environment, all right. So if we look into this biological environment, so coming to this biological environment, so I'll just give you a brief description. And this biological environment, mainly when an EIA focuses mainly on the biological environment. So either it could be flora, either it could be fauna. All right, flora means the plants and the fauna are the animals. So this mainly involves the evaluating the effects on plant communities, animal populations, its habitats, endangered species, migration patterns of the animals, and the survival of the species, and the overall vegetation cover. All these also come into the consideration. All right. And coming into the ecosystems, where this covers mainly the broader impacts on the ecological process, that is the biodiversity and the interconnectedness of the living organisms and their environment. And the habitats, mainly the assessment of the destruction or the fragmentation of the habitats that are vital for the species survival. And the main considerations include this biodiversity, habitat loss and fragmentation. So biodiversity, which assess the potential loss of species diversity and the genetic variation. And habitat loss and fragmentation, where the evaluating how a project might destroy or divide the habitats, isolate the population, and reducing its viability. And coming to the impacts on the endangered species. So the impacts on the endangered species, that is if a project, if it affects the, like, to determine, in order to determine a project could harm or the threaten the survival of a protected or the vulnerable species. So that and all will be like assessed, and the ecological process are mainly to examine how a project might disrupt the natural process like pollination, the nutrient recycling, and the water flow. So all these are the ecological process, and the main components in this biological EIA is the baseline studies, where the gathering data of the existing biological conditions of the project, and to impact prediction, where the forecasting of the potential impacts or potential effects of the project on flora, fauna, and the ecosystem, and impact evaluation, where by determining the significance of the product predicted impact, and mitigation measures by developing the strategies to minimize or offset the negative impacts, and monitoring by establishing programs in order to track the actual impacts of the project, and also to ensure the mitigation measures that are effective. So, mainly the identification of impacts, many projects can cause the terrestrial and habitat loss. For example, they are classified into land conservation for industrial and residential use, land conservation for the agricultural use and transportation use, timbering practices, grazing practices, mining practices, water management practices, military and recreational and other activities all come under this process. So coming to the this other activities and all will be discussed in the later classes, and that's all for today. And today we have learned about EIA of air environment, EIA of noise environment. How do we predict? How do we evaluate the potential and significance of the impact and all we have discussed, and we have started this EIA of biological environment, which includes the natural vegetation, flora and fauna, and in detail we'll be looking into this biological environment in the next class. So that's all for today. Thank you all for your time, and thank you.